EFDD David Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've never had such a lot of socialist bilge in my life. Number one, Miss Scott Cato. Well, I don't think what you said is very patriotic, but then again, I don't expect that from you. I wonder if the people who voted for you realise how unpatriotic you were. She's not proud of Britain, and she seems to want to have a go at Mr. Banks, who gave money to a campaign out of his own pocket because he believed in something. Well, all I can say is Mr. Soros, who seems to be backing the EU, nobody wants to ask questions about him. Well, perhaps it's time you did, because he's been backing the EU and all their madcap schemes and trying to undermine British democracy, and I believe that he made a great deal of money out of the collapse of the pound. Well, I'm getting to that, sir. Under British law, may I point out to the lady from The Guardian, British company directors are obliged to minimise the taxes of their shareholders. That is the way we do things in Britain. That's why our economy is successful. Property rights and their protection are central to the purpose and function of the state. The EU seeks legitimacy by claiming to protect property with Byzantine rights. One recent example are the claiming protection data and the General Data Protection Regulation and the protection of intellectual property, the link tax that was passed by the committee yesterday. You're not really interested in protecting property. The GDPR and the link tax just ruses, really, to hide the EU's desire to interfere in everyone's private life. We have proof here. Rather than protecting property rights and the data collected in the Paradise Papers, you abuse them for political gain. And from what I've heard, no crimes were committed. Most interesting. This committee is more concerned with virtue signalling rather than property. I'd like to know, well, most importantly from the lady from The Guardian, how she thinks that business could possibly survive if every employee goes about blabbing about everything in the company. How in the name of goodness? Obviously, you've never had any experience of business, or you'd realise it would be impossible to conduct business or banking or anything else if there was not confidentiality. And they must have to face the test of the law. If they're going to make remarks or they're going to say things about companies, they must face the rigour of the law about this, as should journalists. If they're willing to say something, they should back it up, and there should be some risk. Otherwise, you just go around destroying people's characters with no effort whatsoever, and no risk to yourselves.
Yeah.
Those are my questions, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Garside, please.
I'm not sure which one to tackle first, or which were the questions, but I might pick up your point about our right to information about what's going on inside companies and inside the structures set up by private individuals to manage their wealth. I think that private information has to be private, has to be guarded under the law. We all have a right to privacy in our affairs, but that also, and the law does this, has to be balanced with public interest. You say that no illegality was exposed within the Paradise Papers. There were cases of tax avoidance that was challengeable in court. The HM Revenue and Customs is currently scrutinising the scheme that was operating in the Isle of Man that was used to import hundreds of private jets without paying import tax in Europe. So I think there are examples there where tax awardance was so aggressive to the benefit of already very wealthy individuals that it may have even overstepped the law. We don't know yet. We await the outcome. But yes, certainly we have to be very careful when we're handling people's private data, one, to keep it safe. We have all sorts of measures for doing that, to delete material that we don't think has any public interest, so we try not to hold on to that sort of material. But we also have a duty when we're presented with things that may not be illegal, but that certainly go against what society thinks should happen, that maybe enhance inequality in our society, the offshore system provides a system that benefits the very wealthy, and we would argue that's at the expense of those who can't afford to use it. And so it's not just a question of was there any illegal behaviour, but was there behaviour that was morally wrong, that was unethical, that was aggressive, and should we be pushing for reforming that system? And I think that the Paradise Papers have shown that we should be pushing for reforms, and we were right to interrogate that data.
Just come back, as Ms Scott Cato was allowed to come back.
That we beyond the time frame and
yes, but Ms Scott Cato was allowed. May I ask, Madam, why don't you chase Mr Soros? Why don't you find out what he was doing? And why don't you talk about how much money the British government, taxpayers' money, was squandered trying to keep us in the European Union, sir? Madam.
Thank you.
The Greens, Molly Scott Cato, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd also like to start by thanking Juliet and her colleagues at The Guardian for the really excellent work they're doing defending the rule of law and various other issues. I'm not feeling proud about everything about Britain at the moment, but she and her colleagues are making me feel very proud. And I'd like to develop this theme of the link between Brexit and tax avoidance, and the link between the so-called bad boys of Brexit in particular, as evidenced by the Paradise Papers. So we know that many of the proponents of Brexit were found in the Paradise Papers and that they have strong offshore connections. Aaron Banks, for example, I'm actually his MEP, that's a rare honour, favours tax havens including the Isle of Man, Gibraltar and the British Virgin Islands. Jacob Rees-Mogg, I'm also his MEP. His investment fund is managed via subsidiaries in the Cayman Islands and Singapore. Meanwhile, Lord Ashcroft achieved notoriety through exploiting the UK's non-dom tax status, and he also featured prominently in the Paradise Papers. So I'd like to ask you, Juliet, what's your assessment of the link between these bad boys of Brexit and the Paradise Papers? Do you think there is a link between their interests in making sure that the UK leaves the European Union and their interests in tax havens? And is this what they really mean by taking back control?